I want to hear from you when you first saw that email from Cambridge that you got in. How did you feel?
I knew that I had the support, but still it was just so scary to open the offer. And once I saw it, I just froze.
There's been an update to your application on the day Cambridge apps are going to come out. And then when I opened it, I was just rereading it for a minute and then I realized it. But I don't think it's hit me even now.
When was that first moment that you decided to apply to Cambridge?
The US applications were really frustrating for me compared to the UK because the UK, one is that it's a unified application system with UCAS.
A lot of times students are concerned, right? What sort of curriculum should we take up? Is it CBSE? Is it ICSE, IB, A-levels? There are so many different options. So I want you guys to both talk about your curriculums.
I think A-levels really allow you to excel at what you're best at.
I actually do quite appreciate IB nowadays because
how did you both decide whether it's going to be Oxford, it's going to be Cambridge?
Cambridge tends to be more holistic with their applications compared to Oxford.
picking college is kind of because the more prestigious colleges generally have a lower acceptance rate while less prestigious colleges have a high acceptance rate.
So knowing what you know now, do you think you could have done all of this independently on your own without any support or no?
I really think that without Gwyn, I would have been completely clueless. Half of the credit for me getting in goes to Gwyn or even more.
The most unnecessary stress I gave myself was
applying to the US.
So a couple of weeks ago, the Oxford results came out and we're absolutely thrilled here at Rostrum office. We're sitting down with two students who got into Cambridge and we'll be learning a lot from them about how they navigated their entire application journey. So let's hear them out.
So I'm Udayvir. I study at the Shriram School, Malsari. Doing the IB program, I was given an offer from King's College, Cambridge for history and politics at undergraduate level. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yes, Saisha.
I'm Saisha and I have an offer to study law from Queen's College, Cambridge. Currently, I'm a student at Prometheus and I do the A-level syllabus. And I study history, psychology, and economics.
Okay, fantastic. Well, before we get into the process, right, of how did you guys go about the entire thing, I want to hear from you when you first saw that email from Cambridge that you got in. How did you feel? Whoever wants to go first.
So I actually didn't read my email first.
Okay.
I got a notification in my Gmail from Track that there's been an update to your application on the day Cambridge apps are going to come out. So then I shut myself in my room for an hour. I lay down in the dark and I listened to music to try and calm myself before I opened it. And then when I opened it, I was just rereading it for a minute and then I realized it.
Okay.
But I don't think it's hit me even now.
Fantastic. What about you?
I went to school that day and all of my teachers, my friends knew. And so I knew that I had the support, but still it was just so scary to open the offer. And similarly, I got a track offer first. I didn't get the email. And the offer was sandwiched between my Warwick and my Durham offer. So I didn't even see it in the beginning.
Okay.
And once I saw it, I just froze. And yeah, it just it took me a few minutes to process. And then I told my parents.
And what was their reaction?
They were so happy. But I think it was just a moment of surprise for all of us.
Right. Now let's take it back a couple of years, right? Let's start from when was that first moment that you decided to apply to Cambridge or even think about Cambridge?
I mean, I don't think that there was really one moment. It was just a combination of decisions that led me to choose Cambridge because I knew I wanted to do something close to history and politics from a few years ago. But a few years ago, I also decided that I wanted to aim to study in the UK rather than in the US or in India. But I actually don't know. I think it just came about as a combination of these two things, that I want to study history and politics. I want to do it in the UK. What's the best place I can do this? Cambridge. And when I decided that, I started working with Rostrum to just get at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes.
I think my reason is also very similar to that. I knew that I wanted to study law and the most sensible decision was the United Kingdom for me. And Cambridge just represented a dream that I had to study from one of the best and most like knowledgeable places that I could, to get like the best educational experience that I could. And it was just this like aim that I wanted to meet. And that's how I decided that. In the beginning, well, I was a little ambiguous. That was Oxford, Cambridge, but I knew that at the back of my mind, I knew that it was Cambridge.
So we're going to get to that part where we ask you, how did you decide between Oxford and Cambridge? But this is a very interesting combination because, Saisha, you did A-levels, right? And Uday, you did IB,
IB, yeah.
right? And both these curriculums are very different in terms of what they offer, in terms of how do you prep for it. And a lot of times students are concerned, right? What sort of curriculum should we take up? Is it CBSE? Is it ICSE, IB, A-levels? There are so many different options. So I want you guys to both talk about your curriculums. What are the strengths of your curriculums? What are the weaknesses? Talk to us about A-levels first, Saisha.
Right. So for me, I think the sort of idea behind A-levels is the fact that it offers specialized opportunity for you to focus on what you're passionate about. So for me, it was a focus on history, economics, and psychology. I think compared to IB, where you're forced to like study 6 different topics, I think A levels really allow you to excel at what you're best at. And I think that just makes the experience a lot more streamlined and focused. In combination, I think it's important to look at the exam pattern. For instance, A levels are purely like a pen and paper examination. That's all they assess you on, compared to IB, where you have different elements. I think you have papers and things. And so I knew that I was more comfortable with the pen and paper final examination format. And so that's why I think I lean towards A levels.
Okay.
So sometimes I also wish I took A-levels because you could just focus on your subject. But I actually do quite appreciate IB nowadays, because one good thing about having to do 3 separate subjects is that it allows you to widen the breadth of your subject matter and learn how to link it to your main subjects. So what I did was the subjects that I would have taken if I'd have done A-levels, which were history, global politics, literature, I took those as HLs, which means I just did more work on them. And my 3 other subjects also contributed in really meaningful ways to me. Like, for example, I did environmental science. And in environmental science, you learn of this one concept called I think Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, which is that the Earth is a self-regulating system. And you learn a lot about systems as a whole, systems that can either amplify or that can suppress disturbances. And that also led me to a lot of ideas about politics and political economy. For example, the free hand of the market, or the free market for ideas and culture as well.
That's quite interesting, and that very closely, I think, mirrors the UK and the US undergraduate system, because both the systems are not very compatible, right? The UK looks more at academic depth. The US looks more at academic breadth. But I think it's also a myth. A lot of students sometimes think that to apply to the UK, you need A-levels. That's not the case. You can also apply through the IB curriculum as well, right? But the IB gives you more breadth in that way. And obviously the A-levels gives you more academic depth. So as a follow-on question from that, was US an option for you both as well, or was it always the UK, Saisha?
For me, I wanted to study law, as I've said, and because of that, the US has never really been compatible, given that India and the US follow 2 different legal systems. Compared to that, the Indian judicial system is borrowed from the United Kingdom's judicial system. And because of that, studying law in the United Kingdom makes it easier for me to transition to the Indian legal system if I wish to do so in the future. And thus, it was just more direct and a more feasible option. In addition, in the United States, you have to do pre-law followed by law school, which I think is just taking a long way for the same result, whereas in the United Kingdom, you have a 3-year program. And so for me, United States was never really a target.
Okay. And did you only apply to the UK, or was there any other country? Okay, fantastic. What about you, Uday?
So initially I thought that I could do the US, but when I finalized on wanting to do history and politics, I was kind of stuck in the US because they don't offer the combined course. So I had to choose either history or politics. And along with that, I just kind of tacked it on afterwards, like as an afterthought to my Cambridge application. So I just kind of did it to shoot my shot. I didn't really put as much time in on it as it would have needed to be a competitive application. I was mostly hoping to get by on my grades.
Right, right. And I think this is where a lot of students get it wrong because they think both systems are compatible. So the prep work that needs to be done is very similar. But I think for the US, the application system is obviously very different. The kind of things that they're evaluating you on are very different. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Uday? For the US, what were the different things that you were focusing on, which was very different from the UK?
Yeah, the US applications were really frustrating for me compared to the UK, because the UK, one is that it's a unified application system with UCAS. So you only have to write one essay, whereas in the US, you have to write so many. And more than that, I think extracurriculars is the main differing point. Extracurriculars and standardized tests like the SAT. So, I mean, the SAT I could also use for Cambridge, so that's a plus. But extracurriculars, I personally don't agree with the way the US does extracurriculars, because it forces you to do a lot of extracurriculars on things that are outside your interest. So it goes beyond, like I was talking about my point in IB about how exposure and breadth is necessary, but but it doesn't mandate work in breadth. The US extracurricular system forces you to work in breadth, and that leads to a lot of people doing things that they aren't passionate about, they don't enjoy, just to fill up the activity list with things that look different from each other. Whereas in the UK, there's no, like, technically you don't even have to give extracurriculars. You just do them for something that you can put in your personal statement. And I like that a lot more, because to have your extracurriculars work in seamlessly, to blend them in with your personal statement while you're applying, I feel like that's a better solution than to have them separated like that.
Right, right. So extracurriculars, obviously for the US, but in the UK, we have something called super-curriculars, right? Saisha, do you want to talk a little bit about what all activities did you do for the UK?
So, as we know, the super-curriculars are academic in nature. They are an extension of your interests in the subject. For me, working with Gwen, our focus was on essay competitions, on academic research, and really reading, like wide reading, to highlight elements that made my application strong. For instance, I did the Julia Woods history essay competition, and this was a 4,000 word research paper that we had to write. I spoke about the Indian Penal Code, its history, its impact, and how it's sort of a reflection of British colonialism even now. So I think, and I wrote about why this sort of interests me given my background in India. Apart from that, a lot of lectures. I think that's really necessary to get an idea of why you're interested in the subject. I watched Jeremy Waldron's lectures on the rule of law and dignity, and that gave me a really interesting perspective on how law, through its procedures, reinforces human dignity. And I spoke about that in my personal statement. So really, the focus is on academic topics that highlight your interest and are an evidence of the work you've done to show them that you're really passionate about it.
And where do you think, Saisha, a student who's just getting started, right? Maybe there's a student in grade 9, grade 10 looking to do law in the UK. Where should they start from? Where should they access these resources? What should they read? What should they watch?
I think a great place to start, and this was the starting for mine as well, is the reading lists on the Oxford and Cambridge website. They're similar, but not exactly the same, and I think they offer a great place to start. There are also multiple different books that give you an overview of what law has to offer as a subject. I think those are great reads to get an idea. Apart from that, I think it's really about personal research. Read different books, watch lectures. The Cambridge Law faculty has some really lovely lectures on different legal topics. And that's where I sort of realized that I was interested towards technology and law. More than that, I think just be aware of the news. I think what's happening in the current day gives us a lot of material to work with in terms of why we're interested in a topic. I spoke about cases that have been ruled on and are currently going on, and there's like debate about them and why they sort of played into my interest.
Okay, that's interesting. I think that's a good point, right? If you just go on Oxford Cambridge's website, look for your particular course, they already have published a reading list. So I think that's a great place for.
It's a great place to start. It's by no means the only work that you must do, but like I said, it's just a really nice way to get a taste of what the subject expects of you. And and you don't have to read every single book on that list, right? You start by exploring it, you interact with it, and you'll find topics that you gravitate towards more. And then it's just about exploring them further.
Right, right. What about you there? What did you do for your UK application? What activities did you do?
So my like extracurriculars, super-curriculars were kind of split into two categories, which is one is just like exploring the theoretical of my beliefs more, and then one part is bringing them more into practicality. So for exploring the theoretical, I did the things that Sasha was talking about, like research, reading, a discussion with Gwyn helped me a lot. And for the practical, it was just about trying to bring the subjects that I was studying into real life and into what I was witnessing, because like I'm doing history and politics, both are theoretical subjects. They're not really linked to material things, right? So one thing that I did was that I was the managing director of my school's editorial board. And through that, I learned a lot about how organizations, institutions work, how mass leadership can happen. And I did MUNs, which taught me about diplomacy. I did an internship teaching children history. And that taught me a lot about how like history is propagated as a subject. And yeah, I also did essay competitions. I did the Julia Woods like she did, but I did mine on intercourt dynamics in Asian states, which would create opportunities for Europeans to exploit them. So like between different factions at court. And I also did the John Locke essay.
Let's talk about Oxford or Cambridge, right? And before I get into that, I'm going to give some obviously basic information for anyone who's watching us today who wouldn't necessarily know what that means, right? So when you apply to the UK, obviously you can apply to only 5 universities, right? Through the UCAS portal. And out of those 5 universities, if you are a candidate who's looking to apply to Oxford or Cambridge, you can only apply to one. You can't apply to both, right? So with that, how did you both decide whether it's going to be Oxford, it's going to be Cambridge? Tell me a little bit more about your thought process.
So I think for me, I looked at what the admissions process entailed for both the universities, because while they're often clubbed into one, via Oxbridge, there are actually quite important differences in how they assess candidates. For instance, based on my research, it's evident that Cambridge interviews a larger proportion of their candidates. And I think that gives you a better opportunity to prove yourself. And I think it's like, also like Cambridge tends to be more holistic with their applications compared to Oxford. And I think that was the primary basis for my decision. Apart from that, I looked at the faculty, and like how Cambridge specializes in the topics that I want to study in law. I found professors in Cambridge whose work that I found interesting, and I wrote about that in my application. And so, assessed as a whole, I think Cambridge just looked as a more appealing option. Apart from like this objective measure, I think there's also an element of where you feel yourself gravitating towards. I know that this is not exactly like a concrete way to make a decision, but I think it is important to go with what your gut is telling you to do. And for me, that was Cambridge.
Were there any other fun elements that you considered? I know that you liked the city.
Yeah, I did like love the city of Cambridge, and I had the opportunity of visiting both, and doing a summer course in both Oxford and Cambridge. And based on my experience, I found Cambridge to be a nicer fit based on my personal preferences. But of course, those are like extra factors. Those aren't on basis of what you make your primary decision, right?
Right.
For me, the decision was mostly on the admissions process.
Well, I don't agree because I'm biased towards Oxford, obviously. But what about you then? How did you decide?
I mean, to me, initially, Oxford and Cambridge pretty much seemed the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I I didn't do that much research about admission process and such. I just decided to go with where I'd want to study more because I felt like if I wanted to study more at Cambridge, I'd work more to get there and I'd have more conviction. So, I mean, I visited both the cities. I like Cambridge a lot more. I felt it was greener, more open, less crowded, and I like a place like that. And beyond that, just so I'd been talking to a few people, and they told me that Cambridge has more of a reputation for being like a nerdy school. Sorry, a nerdy school.
Yeah.
So that really appealed to me because it seems like a fun place to go, and I really want to get nerdy with my subject.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in my subject, and I feel like Cambridge would have a better environment for me to pursue that. So that's why I decided to apply there. And yeah, by the time I could have reconsidered, I was already deep into it. So decided to keep on going.
Right, right. Not a lot of people know, but obviously Oxford and Cambridge follow a collegiate system, right? They have colleges, about 40-ish for both Oxford and Cambridge. What did that process look like? I want you to explain a little bit about what are these colleges? What is a college system? What do you do in your college as opposed to your department? Saisha, do you want to start?
Sure. So yeah, the collegiate system is, I think, an element that's unique to Oxbridge and really offers you to be able to like interact with your supervisors through supervisions, and build a community for yourself in your college. And so you become a member of the college that you get accepted to. While making the decision, because Cambridge has 30 colleges, and so it can be a little overwhelming being faced with all of them. I did the tedious task of researching the faculty at every college and seeing which was the best fit for me. So, for example, at Queen's, like I told you, I found this professor who worked with AI and law, and I was just fascinated by her work and wanted to interact with her more. And so that sort of influenced my decision towards Queen's College. Also, I think the location and size matters. Queen's is a relatively larger college, has more international community, is known for being friendly and open. And I think those factors just help reinforce it. And yeah, I think I had the opportunity of visiting Queen's College as well. And I think that also was like the final nail that told me that it's the right fit for me.
Yes. Uday, how did you pick your college?
So to me, like 30 colleges is an intimidating thing. And there's a lot of factors you can assess them on. So I worked with Gwyn on this as well. But what I did was a slightly more data-driven approach where I just took different factors like the history and politics, acceptance rate, the academic ranking, the Tompkins table, like international students proportion, the funding that they give to students. I made that into a table, assigned different weightages to it, and then I just, from the top 5 that came out from that, I made my decision. So, like once you have a rough idea of the colleges you want to go to, it's picking colleges kind of like gambling because the more prestigious colleges generally have a lower acceptance rate, while less prestigious colleges have a high acceptance rate. So it just depends on where you think that you have a good shot of getting in. How do you hedge your bets well?
Mm-hmm.
So like in my last 2 picks were King's and Clare. And I spoke with Gwyn about this as well. He told me the same thing, that King's is more prestigious. It's a better college, but it's harder to get into.
Mm.
So really just came down on whether I was willing to bet on myself. And I was, and luckily it paid off, which is what justified the decision. Otherwise it would have been quite unwise of me.
Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of students do get worked up, right? Which college should we apply to? Do you guys think it really matters at the end of the day because it's University of Cambridge? How would it differ, your experience from one college to another?
For me, I think the prestigiousness of the college wasn't a deciding factor, and of course that depends on like person to person. I was more concerned with finding the college that would be the right fit for me socially, and would really give me the opportunity to explore my interests. And I think that's when the faculty really comes into play, and the like activities offered by the college, the societies in the college. and the general sort of environment. And I think you can read about it, you can research about it, you can speak to people about it. And Gwen was also instrumental in basically confirming what I thought and telling me and giving me his opinion, which I valued highly. And apart from that, I think, like, this is what I think. I'm not sure if it's really the case, but I'm guessing once you get into Cambridge, the sort of novelty of being in Cambridge will wear off. And so it's like you're left with the college itself rather than, how prestigious it is. And so it's important that for me that it's like a right fit for me as a person rather than its like reputation.
The next thing I want to talk to you about is more around, okay, you've picked Cambridge out of Oxford and Cambridge. What about the other four choices on your UCAS portal, right? How do you pick the other four universities? Do you choose the most aspirational universities? Do you go a bit safe and do a couple of backups? What was that process for you like? Apart from Cambridge or there, where else did you apply?
You've just got to have a balance between your reaches and your safeties, just like they do in the US. So like schools that you're pretty sure you'll get into, and then schools that you'd want to go to if not Cambridge. So that's kind of what I did. I did King's and LSE as schools I'd want to go to if not Cambridge, and then St. Andrews at Edinburgh as like safeties, things that I knew were guaranteed.
And the same course at every university?
Pretty much the same course. Some of them had slight changes. Like at King's, it was history and international relations instead of politics, but
Right.
pretty much the same.
That's another thing that students need to know, right? When you're applying through the UCAS portal to 5 universities, your course and the program that you apply to has to be similar, right? Or adjacent in that way. What about you, Saisha?
For me, I was only applying to the United Kingdom for law. And so I played it a little safer. I put Cambridge as like my aspirational college, and I chose universities that did not require the LNAT in case the LNAT would go sideways. And so I chose Warwick and Queen Mary as my backup options, and King's College and Durham as universities I'd be happy to go to if I didn't get into Cambridge. I think like my personal preferences factored into this decision because I wasn't really a fan of being in London throughout my undergraduate years. I found the city to be a little overwhelming for me. I prefer a slightly remote campus. And so I think apart from King's, I didn't pick any universities in London precisely for this reason.
Right.
And so, yeah, apart from looking at like how prestigious the university is, I also factored in my personal preference.
Definitely. I think geography matters as well.
Geography matters. Yeah.
Right. Oxford, Cambridge and London, it's this interesting triangle, right? That you can be inside of or outside. Obviously different cities, geographies, so whatever you are comfortable with in that respect. Now, it's again interesting that both of you applied to Cambridge, both of you applied for your own respective programs. You had a test that you took, Saisha, but you, on the other hand, did not take a test, right? So how it happens, obviously, in the US, you need to take the SAT or the ACT, which is a common standardized test. But in the UK, you need to take your course or your program-specific tests, right? Saisha, do you want to tell us a little bit about your LNAT experience? How did you prepare for it?
Okay. So the LNAT, it can be quite scary test, and for me the preparation really depended on Gwen's advice. I wrote practice essays because the LNAT has 2 sections, the MCQ section and an essay section, and so I worked with Gwen writing essays under timed conditions based on prompts that he gave me, and then he gave me feedback. For MCQs, I practiced them on my own. And I think in hindsight, I should have paid more attention to the MCQ section as well, because I think I did prioritize essay prep over it, and that reflected in my results. But mostly it was my LNAT prep was heavily influenced by Gwen and his feedback, which was really valuable.
And what about you there? So your program didn't really have a test, right?
No.
So I think it all came down to your personal statement, your profile, your interview. Yes.
But one thing that there was in my program was that we had to submit written work of ours that we had written in the past that was marked by a teacher from our school. So that was basically what I worked with in lieu of the standardized test, where I took 2 essays that I had written earlier, worked with Gwyn a lot to perfect them, cut them down to word limit, because one of them was 4,000, I had to cut it to 2,000. And yeah, just got them marked by teachers, submitted them.
Now, apart from the test, obviously, there's another big component throughout the process, which is a letter of recommendation, right? You need one letter of recommendation from a teacher at school. Tell us about what that was like. Who did you ask? What did you think makes the most sense?
I think that you just have to trust your teacher. That's perhaps the most important factor, is choosing a teacher you trust and knows that they're like aware of your academic capabilities and aware of you as a person. It was really interesting for me because I switched schools a year before the letter of recommendation was required, and so my teacher knew me for a year before she had to write the letter, and so I was like a little worried that perhaps she might not be able to like write about me in a way that that Cambridge would want. But again, teachers, I think their experience, they know what the universities want, and more than that, they want you to succeed. And you just have to trust them, and they'll write a good letter.
Right. What about you there? Who did you ask?
So I asked my history teacher, and I think the only real criteria for who you pick is just someone who knows you well, who you worked with over a period of years, and someone who's somewhat related to your subject. So, like, I had written my extended essay with this history teacher. I had worked with her for 2.5 years almost. So it just made sense to me to pick her.
Right. And a lot of students think, oh, we're going to ask the principal of the school, right? Or the admissions director, or get someone famous, right? Through someone's connections to write them a letter of recommendation for probably an internship that they did at this big company. So all of that doesn't work, right? What matters is someone who's worked with you, is closely related to your subject, like you said, and should have content, right?
Yeah, just to add to this discussion, I think making a brag sheet is really important. And this was something I was advised to do by Gwen. And my teacher was happy to like consider that. And what you want to do in the brag sheet is tell them that this is a quality of me like that I possess as a student, and this event is where I've showcased it to you in class. And you want to evidence everything that you're saying, and the teacher needs to evidence that in the letter. And so I think the brag sheet is basically your best way to get a good letter of recommendation, because you're reminding the teacher why you're a good student, and you're asking them to basically give their opinion on you. And so oftentimes they might not be able to recall particular events, and so the brag sheet can be a really useful tool.
Exactly. Okay, fair. All right. Now, 4,000 characters to tell Cambridge exactly who you are, right? Divided into 3 questions. The format changed this year, right? It's not what it used to be last year. I want you both to talk to me about what was that process like, 3 questions, what to add, what not to add. We'll start with you there.
I mean, I worked really extensively with Gwyn on my personal statement. We went through, I think, 11, 12 drafts of it. And the main thing is just that you got to figure out what the professors want to read about you. Because a lot of times you can just say, oh, I have these qualities. Oh, I'm good at academics. That's not really going to change anything. They know that you're good at academics. They know that you must be determined or whatever to be able to like apply here. But what they really want to know is what makes you a good student for Cambridge. Like, why will they enjoy working with you? Why will you make use of the opportunity? So for me, I sort of organized my whole personal statement around the idea of anarchism and like pursuing my subjects as an extension of my anarchist philosophy, because that was something that I really wanted to talk about and something that differentiated me from other candidates. So I framed my choice of history and politics as an anarchist choice to one, study how governments can oppress people, and also because they're like truly theoretical abstract fields. Like, for example, in the sciences, you have limits. you cannot go past the speed of light. You cannot compress something down until it's nothing. But when a field like history or politics is formed by the collective imagination and minds of people, there's really no limit to it. So you can have really preposterous things happening, like the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, all that. So really, it's just about trying to communicate that passion through your personal statement. That's
Right.
what I think worked for me.
And how does that process of talking to your rostrum mentor, in this case, obviously Gwyn, how does that process lead to that eventual point where you write that personal statement? What goes into it? What sort of discussions, questions do you discuss?
So what would happen with Gwyn was that I would write a draft, I'd send it to him, and then we'd meet to discuss that draft, discuss issues he had with it. And then I'd sit down and rewrite part of it while in the meeting with him, speaking to him throughout, and then I'd finish it and then send it to him later. So a really large part of it was just that I really appreciated the way Gwyn gave feedback. He was very to the point with it. He was very straight out with it, and he often picked up on a lot of things that I wouldn't have picked up on myself. And more than that, he didn't limit himself in giving feedback. Like, he would give feedback on the theoretical ideas that you were putting out as well. He would suggest things for you to say rather than just focusing on the way you've written it. And I think that differentiated from a lot of other college counseling experiences where they just try and fix and polish what you've written rather than actually working on what you can write.
Right. And having that sort of intellectual engagement with the student, because as a counselor you anyway have to know a lot about history and politics to be able to give that advice, as opposed to polish the personal statement as well. So would you say that made a difference? The
Yeah,
mentor already knew a lot about your program?
Almost every session leading up to the application was like an interview in itself with Gwyn,
Right.
because he was like an interview. He knew so much about the subjects, and I think it really helped me working with him because he is quite often more intimidating than interviewers. He was a lot more intimidating than my interviewers. So
Right.
that really helped me.
Right.
Like,
And it
it made
helps
me
you kind of
figure out how to work under pressure, how to stay calm in
exactly.
an interview situation.
And we were talking before, right? And you said you've been working with Gwyn for almost 18 months. Do you think that's a good period of time?
I'd say that somebody should try and work with Gwyn beyond just the pure application process of like filling out the forms, writing the statement and all. Because I feel that he also has to get to know you as a person. You also have to get to know him as a person to be able to really figure each other out and figure out how your dynamic works and how you can be the most efficient that you can. So I think personally at least a year for
Right.
working with Gwyn.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Now, well, Uday worked with Gwyn for almost 18 months. Saisha, you worked with our mentors for almost 3 years, right? How was that experience? What did you learn in those 3 years, and how did it eventually prepare you for that interview?
Working with Gwen over 3 years was, I think, such a good opportunity for me to be able to like expand my thinking in a way that aligned with what the Cambridge admissions process requires. And I say this because we tackled topics that are difficult to process, that are very philosophical, intimidating, and very sophisticated in their nature. And we broke them down, we discussed our opinions, and it, like we said, right, you want to show your passion in a subject, right? And so for me it was law. And so by exploring this like range of ideas on law, different philosophers, different theories, I got to understand what area of law I was passionate about through this exercise. And at the same time, you're being able to you're thinking more critically as it responds to Gwen's feedback and sessions with him. And so I think that working with Gwen over 3 years was a fantastic decision. Definitely improved my writing, my reading, my way, like the way that I approach different topics. And I think that reflected in my personal statement.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, and I'm sure you guys agree that the process that you go through actually prepares you for college, right? Actually prepares you for Cambridge. Obviously, Cambridge has supervisions, Oxford has tutorials, so it kind of mimics that environment as well. And I'm sure as a result of going through this process, you'll be able to be more successful at university, right? Because you're already prepared to talk about different concepts, develop arguments, have that critical sort of thinking as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about your personal statement as well, Saisha? What did you choose to include? What not?
The personal statement has always been like this intimidating piece of writing that I've just been scared to like even write. I was hesitant to begin writing the essay, and I told Gwen, and he's like, "Okay, take a step back. Let's evaluate what the personal statement is, and let's break it down into chunks, and approach it in a systematic way." So we started our personal statement prep in May, which I think is a good time to begin thinking about it, start brainstorming ideas, and we approached it based on the questions. And I think the most valuable piece of feedback and advice Gwen's given me is answer the question. Like, do not add unnecessary pieces of fluff and information that doesn't answer the question.
Right. And this is one personal statement, obviously, which goes to all 5 universities that you apply to. So you're not really saying anything specific to Cambridge or LSE or wherever it is that you're applying. Okay. The final part of this process is obviously the interview, right? And a lot of people are just, in terms of getting the right kind of information, accessing what sort of questions are asked, how to prepare for that process. It is an intimidating component of the entire application process. So I know that you guys don't want to discuss the exact questions, but do you want to walk us through what is that process of interviewing with Cambridge and how did you prepare for it?
So, in some way, every session with Win that I had was like an interview because he's a challenging interviewer, and whenever I spoke to him, I could always bring up a topic I wanted to think about, I wanted to discuss, and then he would also gauge me on that like an interview would. So, for example, I could be talking to him one day, we'd be finishing work, and then for the last 10 minutes of our session, I'd say that, I want to talk about this. For example, why I think China is now reverting back to its pre-Dengist era. And then we'd have a discussion on that. He'd follow up on it in later meetings. And so in that way, I got really used to the whole process of the interview, which is bringing up academic ideas, probing them from every angle, and kind of developing them, not just leaving them in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what's required of you at Cambridge as well, in the Cambridge interview too. Because there, the interviewers will bring up ideas, questions. You have to bring up your own ideas in response to that. And you have to demonstrate that you have learned or taken something away from this interview and conversation, that it's not just something useless and redundant.
And what was the day of the interview like?
So I did an in-person interview, and I personally really enjoyed the in-person interview. I think I did much better than I would have in an online interview because to do it online is a lot more intimidating, and there's a lot more perception of what could go wrong, like technical difficulties, of course, but then also you might not be speaking loud enough.
Mm.
So I think that in that way, a physical interview really worked out for me because I don't know, I feel that I was able to communicate more holistically with them through things like body language, appearance. All of that also plays a role, but it doesn't really come in interviews. So I'd also spoken with Gwyn about this when decided to apply to King's as a college that only does physical interviews. And he said that from his experience with me, I would do much better in a physical interview where I could be more informal, more open with the interviewers than in a more like formal, closed off online interview. Mm-hmm. That was one of the reasons why I chose King's as well.
Okay, Saisha, how was your interview experience? And I know that you did it online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my interview, I had a pre-reading, which is essentially a text that they give you before the interview, like 30 minutes before. You get 30 minutes to read it, and then you're asked questions on it in the interview. And so for Gwen and I, the main sort of area to work on was to tackle the pre-reading. So our sessions were tailored to slowly approach like dense pieces of legal text and break them down and analyze them. We started off with simple short paragraphs and we worked our way up to denser, harder, and more complicated and longer pieces of text. And by doing that, you're able to systematically train your brain into identifying cues, phrases, techniques to approach a long piece like the one you're given in the interview. And this is also where like the 3 years that I spent with Gwen played in, because like implicitly and slowly we were walking up to this moment. And I think that's what that made like the interview a lot easier and less intimidating, because we've been doing so much practice for it. um in addition to that, the interview itself was lovely. Like, the interviewers are happy to be there, they want to know more about you, and they want to know why you want to be at Cambridge. And so it's like a lovely discussion where you get to discuss your ideas and also get to hear the opinions of people who are like experts in their field. And you always leave the interview feeling like you learned something, like that you, even if the interview felt difficult, you still learned something. And it's a stressful environment, right? You're under pressure, you're under time conditions, and there's this entire like psychological burden that you're carrying, that this is like the last step, the last chance for you to prove yourself to them. And so it can be quite a stressful and difficult format to navigate. And so because of that, prior practice is crucial to nailing the interview.
Mhm.
And just training yourself to think in a way that highlights your ability to think critically in the interview. And the best way to do that is through preparation.
And a lot of students think you need to give the perfect or the right answer in an interview, right? But that's not necessarily the case. Or what do you think are they evaluating or assessing you on?
I mean, like, of course, you try and give a perfect or right answer. But I think more than that, just like it's an admissions process, right? They're not going to see how knowledgeable you are about the subject already. What they're trying to see is, do they want to teach you? Because these are most likely going to be, your interviews are most likely going to be the people who are going to be doing your supervisions and who are going to be teaching you in the years to come if you get accepted. So it's a lot about just showing that you can teach me. I won't be an extremist who defends his ideas doggedly, doesn't listen to what you say, doesn't try and change his ideas, that I'm willing to put in the work. That's something that you have to show. And really, I think that you just have to have a little bit of fun with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you got to show them that this is something that you enjoy talking about, that even in such a stressful academic environment, when it comes to the thing that you're truly passionate about, everything becomes fun.
Right.
Like, I don't think they want to have such a stolid atmosphere in there.
Knowing everything that both of you know now about the process to apply to Cambridge, obviously how difficult it is, the different components of the application process. So knowing what you know now, do you think you could have done all of this independently on your own without any support, or no?
For me, no. And that's partly because I was so anxious during this entire process. Um, the journey wasn't linear, there were ups, there were downs. And I don't think I would have had the confidence to keep going if it wasn't for like Gwen reassuring me that it's okay, this might not have gone too well, but we can still make this better. And an example of that is that my admissions test wasn't as great as I would have hoped. And so like I was close to just giving up at that time. But still we had the interview left, right? And it's about forcing yourself to believe in your ability to make compensate for the test in the interview. And I think Gwen was just a really important part of my application then. And then also I think the feedback that Gwen gave on my personal statement is invaluable. Like, you need someone who knows you as a person, knows the demands for the subject, and knows the subject itself. And it's someone like that's really difficult to find. And so I'm like really glad that I had Gwen to like help me through this process?
So Gwen was like invaluable for my personal statement, my interview. I would have been like a fish out of water completely if I didn't work with him for 1.5 years, practicing all this and developing my thinking. Because when I came to him, I had very rudimentary ideas about things, and I had a habit of like not really following up on these ideas, just like letting them form, thinking about them for a day or two, and just forgetting them and moving on to the next thing. It was with Gwen that I really learned to like pen it down, think more about it, develop it over time. Like one thing that we'd often do was that I came into a meeting with him with an idea of anarchism, about why I thought that it was the correct way of governance. And there were so many times throughout our work that he challenged what I thought of anarchism, why it was the right ideology. He argued a lot in favor of authoritarianism to try and make me strengthen what I believed, try and make me develop what I believed. And when I was possibly asked about it during the interview, I really think that without Gwen, I would have been like completely clueless. Like
Right.
half of the credit for me getting in goes to Gwen, or even more.
We'll start with you, Saisha. If my browser history during applications leaked, it would expose what?
Cambridge acceptance rate.
I like that. What about you there?
Is anybody anarchist at Cambridge? Please tell me names and addresses.
Okay, fantastic. If I could send one message to my past self when I was starting the entire application process, what would it be?
Have fun, don't stress, do what you want to do.
What about you?
It will work out. Stop stressing.
The most unnecessary stress I gave myself was
Pondering over things that had already happened. Admissions test, mostly.
right. Okay.
Like, I can't change the result. Why am I still thinking about it?
What about you?
Applying to the US.
Yes. If my application process had a title or had a theme, what would it be?
Oh God, why does he use anarchism so many times? Does he know other words?
Okay. What about you?
That's a good question. If my application had a theme, law from my perspective.
Interesting. If your application had to be compared to, I don't know, a meme on Instagram, like a meme vibe, anything which is trending, what would it be? Or are you guys not on Instagram, which will
When
be very
Napoleon
surprising?
says there's nothing we can do and he sits like this on the rock.
Yeah. Anything for you, Saisha?
Oh, like the meme where there's a girl with a bucket on a river and like the water is flowing everywhere. So she's trying to take a bucket to put the water back into the river, but it's flowing again. And so like just taking the bucket and putting the water back. That would probably be mine, because everything is everywhere and I'm sitting here with my laptop trying to like fix it.
Okay, so there are a lot of students right now, Saisha, know there who will be applying to Cambridge, right? This October. They must be preparing their application, working on their personal statement, hopefully. Do you have any piece of advice? Anything that you think, something very specific that you think that they...
I mean, I can't speak for all the courses,
Right.
but for a courses similar to mine, I say that a really big thing is just understanding ideas and picking a few ideas that you really want to discuss, that you really believe in, and working on them. So, like I've said this a lot of times before, but anarchism was a really big thing, and I studied it in a lot of ways. I applied it in a lot of ways. And I think that, like, to show that you actually have ideas, beliefs, things that you're passionate about in your application, in your interview, is really important to make you a student who can engage with ideas and not somebody who is an academic blob, faces academic blob.
My advice would be more general, in the sense that you should know that this process is going to be demanding. It's going to be psychologically stressful. It's really a test of your abilities. And it's putting you through the maximum possible stress. that a process can like put you through. Like, and it's important that you take time for yourself, that you take a step back when things get too stressful. I wish I followed this advice a little more rigidly. There were days where I was working 16, 17 hours just on my personal statement, and I fell into this loop where I'm criticizing my work, and I'm failing to recognize that that has been improvement from the last draft. And this process is difficult, and it's designed to be that way, and it's okay to like admit that it's difficult and take help for it. I mean, like looking back, I was so like set on being perfect in every little aspect that I completely missed the entire point, which is to enjoy the process a little bit, right? And I was putting myself through so much unnecessary turmoil that I think hindered my performance rather than accelerating it. And the most decisive sort of outcome for this was my admissions test, which, like I've said before, didn't go as I planned. And I think that moment made me realize that you need to take a step back when things get too like burdensome, right? And you're not being productive after one point. Yeah, and I think that would just be like my biggest piece of advice as someone who's gone through this process, is to take time for yourself.
Right, because so many components of the entire process are also out of your control, right? There's only so much you can control, and it's important to enjoy the process, like you said, right? Engage with it, because at the end of the day, I think that energy reflects in the interview, right? Whatever you've studied, whatever you've learned, that should come across to the interviewer as well, not as if you're kind of sitting there because someone's asked you to. Okay, fantastic. I think my final question is more around what happens now, right? What are you looking forward to doing at Cambridge for the next 3 years? Where do you want to go after that? Any thoughts on that, Uday?
Well, what I want to do in Cambridge is that Cambridge has long like breaks that you get between terms. So I really want to like explore jobs there,
Right.
explore different careers, internships that I can do, because I was focused more on my degree that I haven't really thought too much about what my occupation is going to be in the future. So I think I want to explore that, and more than that, I just want to enjoy Cambridge. Like I really think that I'm going to enjoy focusing solely on the subjects that I really love, and moreover, just having fun college, because I've worked a lot the past few years. They've been stressful. So I'm looking forward to having a break from school or an end to school.
Having lots of Jack's gelato at Cambridge. What about you, Saisha? What do you want to do in Cambridge?
Yeah, so like my what I want is quite similar. I'm looking forward to traveling a ton during breaks, getting to know like new people and engaging with different perspectives in law. Most of all, I'm excited for this process to come to an end. Because like the past 3 years have just been stressful, and the Cambridge is like what I've been working towards. And so now that I get to enjoy it, I really want to like make the most of my experience there. And yeah, just have fun.
Thank you so much for both of you for participating. First of all, I think it's brilliant as counselors to be able to work with students like you. It just makes our work so much more rewarding as well. But yeah, thank you so much for participating, and all the very best. Well, with that, we come to the end of the podcast. Hopefully, that was very informative for you and you learned something. No matter which stage of the entire Oxbridge admissions process you're in, please feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you and help you out. Thank you.